business. Quick roll call. President Katie Dugan.
Woody Chidick, aye.
Tom Callahan, present.
Cassie Maltesta, aye.
John Helen and
Present.
Lauren Lind. Hi, guys. All right. We are missing Peter, Jack, and Paul. Okay. So first item of business is approval of the minutes from February 3rd, 2022. Typo on the agenda there. I make a motion to approve the minutes from February 3rd, 2022. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Katie Dugan.
Aye.
Aye, Woody Chidick.
Aye, Tom Callahan.
Okay, thanks, guys. Lauren, I don't know what your day looks like, but I was going to suggest, just in case you needed to drop at some point, that we move up on the agenda the update on housing choice and MBTA multifamily zoning district, if that works for you.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Cassie. This was part of what I circulated. It was a long PowerPoint. I think I've had one-on-one conversations with Woody and Tom about it, just so that they're aware. But this is breaking news in terms of the rules and regulations.
Yes, thank you. So to take a step back, yes, there's a pretty long PowerPoint presentation that's really, it's got a lot of information. It's very helpful, and it's from the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association webinar that was held on this that I attended. I will say the MMLA version of the webinar was extremely helpful, whereas the DHCD version of the webinars were really left a lot of questions out there. What we're learning is the draft regulations that DHCD has put forth to match the legislation that is surrounding MBTA communities and housing. The regulations are, they really are going to pose a lot of challenges for us because, there's a floor minimum. Typically it breaks out as to what kind of MBTA community we are a commuter rail community. So there's a certain percentage and land area that you need to have zoning by right for multifamily housing. The problem being is that if you did our calculations simply based on what we should be under MBTA community, we're looking at only about 450 housing units. But the way that the regulations are structured right now, there's a blanket minimum of 750 housing units. If you think about that, that's over 20% of our existing housing stock. So that right there, I feel, is problematic in and of itself. The next problem is that the level of detail that's going to be required to come into compliance. When you talk about the land area, it has to be within half a mile of the commuter rail station. If you draw sort of the circle around what we are looking at, a lot of that is already not going to be eligible because one, some of the land is in Hingham around our commuter rail station. It's not going to be any of our open space land, anything that's really not actually that you can't prove is legally and infrastructure sound for development. That's not going to apply. You're going to sort of need to prove that these items, you need to provide a zoning analysis and sort of the development analysis that goes along with it to prove that, yes, it is feasible to develop this amount of units and it has to be a certain density. So based on the land area and the sort of minimum size alone, this is going to be a huge burden on this town to try to meet. If you can't meet within the exact area, they then want you to continue to expand the circle of your property until you can find parcels to meet this. So there's no exemptions because your town is too small. There's no exemptions because you don't have developable land around your train station. They have thought out all the loopholes and they want everybody to come into compliance no matter what. The problem is that if you're not in compliance, you're then barred from specifically 3 programs. One is the Housing Choice Initiative. That really doesn't affect us because we are not eligible for that program any longer anyway. So that really is not that big of a deal. The Local Capital Projects Fund, I'm not sure how this impacts our town budget. I do have a request in to our finance director to find out what this does for our budget. So that I'll have more information on sooner than later. And then the MassWorks Infrastructure Program is something that we have applied for, and that is a really useful program. I think that would be, it doesn't make sense because the way that they've structured these regulations is sort of inadvertently punishing small communities who don't have the housing there already because, they're saying, you need to have these regulations to make this housing available. But if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, you're automatically barred from the very programs that you need to get the infrastructure. It's really, there's a lot of problems in the way that these regulations are structured. So where we are right now, I am working on doing a more deeper analysis about what this looks like from a land area and what this looks like as to how we might be able to get some sort of compliance. But I think what's really urgent is that they are accepting comments on these draft regulations through the end of March. I'm going to be I'm coordinating with Chris Senior already, and we're planning to go to the select board in March to sort of get their main concerns out. And that way we can pose a letter to DHCD. There's a lot of other organizations. I've been contacted by the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. They're putting together a group letter. I know the MMLA is putting a letter together because there's a lot of concerns that many communities have with the way that these are being enforced. So I think it'd be really important for the town of Cohasset to weigh in about what this regulation is proposing. I mean, quite honestly, it's not in line with any of our long-term planning documents that we've done. It completely would overburden the community in terms of infrastructure available to develop this. We already know we don't have the sewer and wastewater capacity as it is, let alone think about adding 750 housing units. What does that do to our infrastructure capacity and also our school capacity? It's like, if we're talking about that level of housing development, it really becomes sort of an issue. And I guess the question that was left out there, which I thought was really interesting that MMLA pointed out, was that, DHC has been very clear that we don't expect communities to develop these units. And we don't actually anticipate that they may not ever even come to fruition, but we want you to prove that you can. So it's like, what are we going through this exercise for? I think that, in my honest opinion, I think that there's ways that this legislation and the regulations, if they were tweaked, could be used for could be beneficial for us. But the scale and the way that it's being laid out right now, I just don't see that it's going to be feasible for us to come to compliance. So the question is, one, can we comment and hopefully that there's a way to impact and shape these regulations so that there's something that's more tangible and more realistic? Or if not, I guess what the community at some point will have to weigh from a policy perspective is, do we just forego compliance if it's not going to make sense for us anyway? So that's why I'm trying to find out what the financial pieces are that go along with this. So more information forthcoming, but I just wanted to bring this all to your attention because it's much more burdensome and sort of a tall ask than we originally anticipated. And we know at some point the timeline is because we're a commuter rail community, we would have through fiscal year 24 to come into compliance. You have to have a plan of action, at least that outlines what you're going to do by the end of this calendar year in December. And you have to have had at least a meeting to brief your public officials, your highest. So for ours, it'd be the select board by May. But so originally we were planning on having this conversation in April, but given that we have until the 31st of March to submit comments, I think it's really pertinent that we do such. So this is just the first of many sort of tip of the iceberg on this one, but I just wanted to put it on your radar, and that I'll be looking to coordinate with you all as we try to comment for DHCD on these regulations as they exist right now.
Lauren, are there some ways that we could be helpful to you in this regard, or is it really you've got a good grasp of what the impact could be, and consequently a good grasp on the kind of comments that will be submitted? So
what I'd like to say is I'm going to do some more analysis and I'll send it over to you all. And then if you could comment and help me sort of build that case, that would be tremendously helpful, because your input's going to be helpful. I mean, again, I think the case to be made to the state is that, yes, there's opportunity here, but the way that you're phrasing these regulations right now, you're setting up small communities for failure, because it's like you're inadvertently affecting the smaller communities more. The other thing, I mean, for example, it's like when I say we're being penalized, these requirements are for your MBTA communities, but it's not like, for example, the town of Situate, they have 2 commuter rail stations. They don't have to do this twice. They can spread out their fulfillment between the 2 commuter rail stations. So that community with the bigger community, more they have infrastructures of their own, but they have even more land space available for them to use. It almost is like we're being penalized because we're a small community and we only have one. If we had two, we'd have more space to try to analyze this. So I think there's just a lot of ways in which this is, it's problematic in the way that it's been structured. And I don't think that they've thought out every scenario.
Just Lauren, and one other question with like the North Situate Station, would we be within a half mile of that, parts of 3A? I don't know if that's something we could.
Situate can't count us and we can't count other communities. So you can't cross over lines.
Okay. All right.
We would reach into Hingham. There's some undeveloped land in Hingham that we would love to claim, but we can't.
All right. Yeah. All right. That question's been asked and answered.
Oh, they closed that loophole. I mean, I would suggest that people read, like, honestly, the first 5 pages, and then I found, now you guys are going to get vertigo as I go through all of this. But if you get all the way to the back, at like page
28.
Oh my God.
Father.
There's a calendar here. What page is this? It goes through and it kind of reviews everything that you need to know in terms of, I mean, this is what Lauren is suggesting. Like, first you have to study your existing land, look at that 0.5. If you can't expand it, it has to be at least 50 acres. It has to have at least density of 15 units per acre.
A 5-acre parcel.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it has to be parcel and a common ownership. The way it reads is that there are just 5 parcels that could 5-acre. You could combine parcels that exist into 5-acre.
Yeah, you have to have 25. You have to have one area that's 25 acres contiguous, and then no part of the district. So if you're going to draw little circles, no circle can be less than 5 acres.
Do you guys have a sense as to whether we could comply with the regulations by drawing a half-mile radius, or are we going to need to expand further?
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have to expand.
Yeah. I'll show you.
Well, I just curious. I didn't see this in a very quick read, but do they deal with the fact that as you expand the radius, all of a sudden you're a mile or conceivably a mile and a half from the transit station, which defeats the purpose of being, contiguous, because we've got everything from wetlands to cemeteries, as well as state parks and golf courses. You know what I mean? I'm not opposed to it. I just wonder what happens when you expand too far. We can't expand into Hingham, clearly.
They do talk about that, and
I missed that. Okay.
They talk about it in the sense that if you are expanding beyond, it says how much of the district is within the 0.5 miles of the transit station, or if applicable, in an area that allows for easy travel to the transit station. So then they begin to sort of subject you qualitatively to criteria such as, if you're going to expand it a mile down 3A, are there sidewalks that would allow people to transverse 3A, to the so you begin to be subject to, I guess, a different qualitative scrutiny when you expand it. It's my take on it.
Quite honestly, the way that these regulations are structured right now makes it virtually impossible for us to kind of come into compliance.
Hey, yeah. Lauren and Kitty, is there an expectation that where there is developable land, that the town would be expected to like increase density there, or increase like the availability to build on land that is buildable?
Yes. So you have to change the underlying zoning requirements. You have to create a district or an overlay that allows for this minimum of 750 units of potential development. And you have to substantiate it on a parcel by parcel basis. It can be existing development. So you could, if we expanded the circle wide enough to the right, encircle Avalon, and potentially count Avalon's units towards our 750. it can include land that already has a structure on it that could be redeveloped based on your new zoning requirements for that district, or it can be raw land. So it's not, you can count existing, you can count a parcel that has a house on it currently that you're now rezoning to allow for multifamily, and you're allowed to obviously count raw land that could be developed, but you can't count raw land that is wetlands. So you have to go through and exclude anything that has wetlands, which is like all of this kind of greeny brown shade here. So there's a lot of parcels or land that would need to get excluded there. You have to exclude land that you believe could not support it from an infrastructure perspective, which is a really kind of tricky conversation. Given that none of the area that we're talking about down 3A has sewer. So it becomes, does it perk? How much can it sustain in terms of a septic system?
And we can't do much along 3A anyway, right? Like for sidewalks and stuff that all has to go through the state.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to the connectivity problem where, again, the connectivity of the train station is dependent on the state. Now, you could make statements that we're beginning the process to do a complete streets upgrade to 3A North, and eventually there will be sidewalks and connectivity there to kind of bridge
Or would
it.
they say, well, what about the houses on, what is that, the end of North Main Street or Cedar Street? Like those are all primed for like massive density increases.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what they're asking you to do is design your own district. I mean, in this case, if we just made the district the zone, the proposed MBTA transit station zone, you're right. There are houses on North Main Street that would be rezoned into a multifamily. So instead of,
and that's like what the Greenbush area, right? Like the new Greenbush district, you see all those single family homes behind like the Rivershed that are all becoming small time condo development. So it just completely changes the character.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at our circle, it's pretty problematic. You know, the left, we're bumping very close up against the Hingham line. You got a cemetery, you got a golf course, you got Wampatuck, and then as I said, all of this kind of pukey brown green color is wetlands, which takes out a bunch of parcels too from an analysis perspective. So I guess the only thing I would say, Lauren, in response to kind of the way you framed it, is I would tone down a little bit the fact that this level of multifamily is certainly not contemplated in our planning documents, but housing options and housing choices are. So we have to sort of walk that line between, I think we all would like to see more affordable, moderate income housing options in town, but I would say this level, and is again that 750 unit minimum, which is really the problematic piece. It's 20% of our existing housing stock.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think even more importantly, you'll have a mile or mile and a half walk to the train station by the time you end up eliminating, inappropriate land.
Right.
Yeah.
And that defeats the purpose. So my sense is not to get too panicked about this, because it's badly flawed. I mean, it's a kind of a rough cut. I don't view this as final legislation. They may think so, but I think there's going to be a hell of a lot of challenges, not just from little Cohasset, but whoever did this didn't think through the points Lauren and Katie are bringing up.
Right. So I will continue to coordinate with, like I said, the different groups that are putting together support letters so that we can sort of hear what other people are saying. I'll continue to sort of analyze this for what it means for us, and I'll keep you in the loop as this conversation unfolds. But I just wanted to put on everyone's radar that.
I mean, Lauren, I wonder if like part of the counter argument is to show. I mean, I wonder if they're going to say something like, well, have you looked at every single lot within a half-mile radius, and like, what are those options? And I know that I see this chart here, but I think like where like Goodwin Graphics is, like that's a small time little retail, like one story thing that probably is prime. So I could just see them fighting back and be like, no, you do have spaces that would allow for you to do this. But then it's Katie's argument that for the connectivity and accessibility perspective, that those are not primed for development. So I wonder if they're basically going to be like, we need to look at every single parcel and prove to us why those can't be primed for, redevelopment under this new.
Right. And that's where it's like the amount of burden you can protect.
Yeah, that's so much work.
It's so much work. And the other thing that I said was like, I strongly feel this is also flawed, because then you're going to put the burden on municipalities to do complete development analysis and unlock the blueprints for the public to be like, hey, look at all this land, come at it. And it's like, you're going to put that burden on us. That should be, if someone wants to make a profit and develop land, that should be on their burden to do that. Like, why, it's like,
yeah,
trying to compliance for this.
I wonder if the people who wrote this and lobbied for it lived near transit, and they're like, this just increased my value of my property 4 times.
Well, I even was like, who wrote this legislation? Is it like, like the CEO of the Avalon Bay Development Company?
Yes.
Come on.
Reserve. Yeah.
Well, also what you've got going on here are you've got suburban, you've got rural, you've got urban, and the notion that somehow one size fits all is,
it should be conducive to like population size and housing stock size. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, Lauren, I mean, I think we can obviously play a role in terms of commenting and thinking through if you need help parcel by parcel or need a sanity check on the parcel by parcel, like we're totally capable of doing that. I guess my question for you is there a way to sanity check whether Avalon or Old Colony, just based on their current configurations, would get us towards that 750? Because I guess in my mind, if it made sense to sort of draw instead of a perfect circle, as I've demonstrated here, a oval, which kind of elongates down 3A, and you pick up Avalon, does that get us 210 units towards the 750? But
Katie, I know that all the groups that were looking at that before it became the preserve, I think the biggest issue is like, oh, there's so much land here, but the septic or whatever their septic system treatment was right there. So you'd have to wait for sewer to come down 3A.
But you can count, I guess what I'm saying, Cassie, is you can count the existing Avalon units if it meets.
Oh, the existing, I see.
Yes.
Well, and technically, I mean, if you could do an analysis, you could, I mean, of course there's infrastructure complications, but if you actually tweaked the zoning for that whole entire parcel, you could reasonably fit much more than 200 whatever are there right now. So it's like, that's the kind of game that's like, we have to play where it's like, well, this could potentially fit this if you did zoning like this, but it's like, it's this sort of weird puzzling that we're going to have to do here.
Well, in addition to that, with like, for example, where Hingham Lumber is, could you rezone that? That might not change anything, but it could be rezoned.
Right.
It's another large parcel that's close by that is probably, it's within the area. So that might be another point to pick
and all the way back to the sports complex.
But see, here's my question, is that in terms of long-term policy implications, if we're looking to change zoning, are we then giving incentives for people to transfer our commercial tax base into residential tax base? Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like, if we think about the ripple effects long-term of this. So I think there's just a lot to unpack here. Tom has been patiently and
then you're putting more septics into our underground instead, and there's a whole sustainability perspective too.
Exactly.
But you're also looking at private enterprise to foot the bill in large part. The town doesn't have the means.
Right.
Anyway, Tom.
My first thought, Katie's kind of addressed on it. Whatever the town's response is, and there's a lot of flaws with this bylaw, with the minimum number of units and everything, with this proposed regulation, and there's plenty of things to attack, but I think we need to be careful to not have the town come off as, just blatantly opposing this. They called 40B the anti-snob zoning law for a reason, and this is probably because 40B isn't achieving the objectives that they thought 40B, and then when they added 40R and 40S, they're not achieving the objectives of affordable housing around the Commonwealth that they thought it would.
No, I agree, Tom.
And this is a hammer, but there's a reason they're bringing the hammer down.
I think that's why they physically would say, well, have you looked at every single parcel?
Well, but anyway, separate from that, as Katie alluded to, we'd already had discussed that we wanted to increase multifamily options in the town. And let's be realistic about that. The only place that's going to happen in any large scale is on 3A. And so in the draft rewrite, my suggestion is, first of all these different commercial districts on 3A would be one. We don't need a transportation district. We don't need a highway, just one commercial district, but to allow for an overlay for mixed use or multifamily. And in my proposal, it's for the entirety of 3A, but we could limit it to just a portion of 3A. I just think realistically, that's where it's going to go. And the problem with the regulation is the amount of units it's requiring. We don't want that density, but we've got plenty of places. Frankly, I don't think that this office suite project on Situate Hill is ever going to come to fruition.
It's not.
And I think that is going to,
Why is that?
We just heard recently, they walked away, it fell through. They're going back to the drawing board.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
well, if we gave them the option of an overlay for housing or mixed use, I think that's what you would see happen. And that's a large piece of property that could take, 8 acres or something that could take a lot of this burden that's being imposed upon us.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure the town doesn't come off to the state as being
right.
The target of an anti-snob zoning law and not say we're opposed to this. It's just that the numbers are
the numbers don't make sense for us, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're crazy. But I think if we can include Avalon, and if we can include a parcel like Situate Hill and some of these others along here, yeah, may we lose businesses? It's possible, but we have a lot of challenges to large scale economic development to begin with, given our location away from the highway and with an ocean on one side.
Also, there's nothing to say
we have to be realistic. I'm just saying, be realistic about this. And I think the select board's energies ought to be put to, okay, if we are going to have to build this 200 something units, 300 units, 750, it's not a zoning problem. It's going to be a town services problem. How are we going to support a K through 12 system that adds perhaps 100 kids? Katie and I talked about this yesterday, that Avalon at the beginning, it was negotiated down to 2-bedroom units to try to keep the number of kids down, but there still was the prediction it would be something like 73, 75 kids. Never happened, but all this housing is going to generate kids potentially, and the town has got to more worry about that than making a zoning change. We could create a district here fairly easily to deal with this. But the town's response has to be measured. That's all I would say.
I'd agree.
I think the one thing that you mentioned, Tom, that resonated with me was the fact that if we were to make this mixed use and multifamily, you have the chance of balancing that commercial income with going towards satisfying. So I think that's something that perhaps we need to keep in mind as we envision this multifamily. For us, it means loosening up mixed use so that we can get the combination of commercial and apartments up above for.
I mean, what you do there is you would incentivize mixed use by giving them a housing density bonus if they do commercial. And that, I would think, would satisfy the state, because they'd say, oh, well, you're encouraging actually more housing as long as you get commercial. I think there's ways we could deal with that and incentivize what we exactly want.
Yeah. And I don't know how many units are at Old Colony by the train station. Is that like 20 units or something, or?
It's
in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 22. I think.
Okay. Okay. And again, I don't know whether those meet the 15. I mean, the density is tough, because I'm not sure that the Old Colony would meet the density requirement per acre unless that was to be redeveloped. That's probably part of the problem there.
But so it doesn't matter about existing, it's what the potential is. So if we rezone that parcel for a potential for the density that we need to meet, it doesn't matter if there's 20 units there already.
Okay.
Oh.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Because they're not
So-
talking about units on the ground. They're talking about potential units.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference.
So
Yeah,
I don't know how many, it would have to do the analysis, but let's say, for example, if you take a look at that parcel and you figured out zoning that would work and you could put 40 units on that site, then we would count 40, even though there's 20 on the ground. Same thing for Avalon. If we could somehow finagle a way to say we could fit in 400 here, we could count that towards our potential.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, we're ready and willing to help comment on the letter. And certainly, I think the point to the select board is that this has been part of our objective to increase multifamily, but perhaps not at this scale for the community. So it's both opportunity, but it's also this is part of the reason why, we've been trying to come up with what our list of priorities are in terms of content changes. And this one just now popped to, towards the top of the list because it's a state mandate that we do this within a certain time frame. So we know we have to include a multifamily zoning district in our redraft. I mean, there's just no question.
Yes.
It's a question.
Well, whether it's a district, an overlay district, or whether it's just a loosening up of our use regulations in town. I mean, I personally, if it makes economic sense to put multifamily or something way the hell down at the end of 3A towards Situate, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think that would be fine. Or if in the center of town. I mean, I think the economics are going to dictate an awful lot of this, and we shouldn't be overly restrictive even outside of this half a mile circle.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Woody, that this opens up the dialogue around where multifamily makes sense in town. The question will be, if we're doing it in other areas, are we going to be able to count it towards what we need for the state to approve our plan of action? So I'm all for considering it in other areas, but we need to figure out.
Well, I think Lauren can get at this next point, but if we can't comply, the state can't do certain things and withhold some monies, of course. But if we've made a best efforts attempt, I don't see the state somehow cutting us off from all state services or something just because the land and the value of land and everything, whatever.
Maybe that's why it is so. Maybe that is why it's so strict, so that we try with best efforts.
Yeah, I think if we demonstrate best efforts, they probably would be somewhat hard pressed to.
Right, and I think that's what's important also to Tom's point to make in the letter is that it's not like we're saying absolutely not, no way. We're intending to make our best effort. It's just that the way that this is phrased right now, it's totally out of scale with our community's character and goals and things like that. So it's like there's certainly room to address in some capacity. It's just the capacity that's being asked is over the top.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're going to have to prove it out mathematically that we got to 80% of their formula or whatever. So
and then the trick part about all of this is, of course, is that eventually getting it through, because no matter what we can tell people till we're blue in the face that this is what we have to do. But if it comes to town meeting time, we don't have the agreement on, I will say that because of the housing legislation changes, even though this would be a zoning change, because it's a housing related zoning change, it would be a simple majority. It wouldn't require a 2/3 majority to pass a town meeting.
It would 50% majority. And I think that there are a lot of committees and people that recognize the value of things like the mass work grants that would say it's like many things. It's like, we got to swallow this. I'm sure there would be a portion that are libertarian enough that would push back, but ultimately it's like, if we want mass works dollars, we kind of have to make nice.
Yes.
And well, I think in order to get anything through, there has to be an economic analysis that basically Lauren led off with, which is it cheaper for the town to bypass state funding as opposed to the infrastructure costs that compliance might require. I have no earthly idea. But I think
that question makes my head hurt, but I understand what you're saying.
I would make sure we know whether, I don't know what the current permutation of the school building program is, but I'd make sure we don't get cut out of that one. And, you know, we already have a committee that's hot to trot to rebuild schools already. We're, you know, if we insist on a standalone K through 12 system, we're going to need to do more. And so that would be a fund where
quite possibly
we wouldn't want to be cut out of that one.
Well, maybe so, but I can't answer it today, but that economic analysis, that trade-off analysis has to be done.
Correct.
In order to get anything through town meeting or whatever. That's all.
Yep, I agree.
And a timeline on that too.
So Lauren, would it be helpful for people to reach out to Senator O'Connor or Joan Machino individually, or do you want to have the select board do that as a whole? Because I do think that I know both of them can be helpful in terms of context. So guidance on that?
I would suggest that I think we just need to tighten up where we are a little bit more before we start poking them, but I certainly think it will be appropriate to look into the conversation. And I already know that they are also involved with South Shore Chamber of Commerce as well. So I know that, you know, they won't be surprised to hear from us, but I do think it'd be helpful to just tighten up our position just a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. So there's a moment, but the moment is coming in the next month to kind of poke them on this issue. Okay. All right. So unless there's any other questions, I think we're all up to speed on that. I wanted to move to kind of our main topic of the day, which is reorganization and redraft, and beginning to really hone in on what we think the reorganization outline looks like. And we've got a proposal that Tom has been working on for quite a while, and I'll share that first in terms of the reorg memo that Tom wrote. And then Woody and I have also been noodling on this subject. And I think ultimately the goal today is to see if we can kind of debate the merits of what a reorganization outline would look like, so that we can begin to try and begin to pull the text into that format and see how it works in terms of what we're trying to accomplish as kind of the overall goals, which are elimination of redundancies, a better usable format in terms of flow of information instead of just chronologically tacking on bylaw changes. And then also setting us up with a framework that we think going forward is one that we can make, strategic content changes to, like multifamily or other objectives we've been talking about from a goal perspective, but doing it on the existing format, as we've all talked about, is sort of fraught with problems because it's conflicted in so many areas. And frankly, it runs on in a lot of areas. So this was the proposal that Tom had put forth in his memo. And Tom, I don't know if you want to just quickly.
I could short circuit this because I briefly mentioned this to Woody before we got on live.
Tom.
This format is fine. That you and Woody have come up with, and I can. It won't take long to put the existing rewrite draft into, move it around into all of this. I think this is fine.
Okay.
Again, little thing, again, there's some substantive changes I proposed here and there that we can get into later that still apply to be discussed in whichever format. There's a little thing just jumping out at me again.
Tom, can you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to. I did this last night. I'm reading and speaking at the same time, which is a challenge.
I know you can do two things at once. Come on.
So I mean,
we'll some gum.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot. I don't want to create a debate over my format, this format. This is fine to me, and I can move things around and organize it.
Okay. Well, why don't I share?
Share Woody's, share what you put together, and
okay.
And, I can comment as necessary, as in comparison if necessary. But
okay. All right, let me see if I can. All right, view, zoom. Oh, that's too small. Sorry.
I printed it so I could see it.
Okay. Sorry. All right. So Woody, I'll jump in and you can sort of tell me what I'm missing here. So I guess the first premise of this was one that we've talked about that we footnoted here at the bottom, which we're going to attempt to pull out all of the rules and procedures out of the bylaws and put them into a ZBA planning board rules and regulations.
Okay, first jump in, as well as Concom. Some of the rules and regulations obviously go beyond, but wherever they belong.
Yeah, can I just comment on that? Is that in the rewrite that I've done that exercise. And again, the proposal for the regulations is not only Concom, but all the land use related boards. There'd be in following the format of the Code of Massachusetts regulations, which every executive agency that has regulations, it's still compiled in a single place, the CMR. And I'm envisioning a similar document for Cohasset, where Concom's rules, Board of Health, sewer, water, and then zoning, there's anything
that would be great.
And that's already in a draft form. And then there's even a section that trying to put some uniform standards for all the boards, like what has to be filed, what's the scale of plans, does it have to be on paper, does it have to be in electronic format, trying to create a uniform application procedure so that every land use board is operating from the same set of permits and the same information and criteria as much as possible. And that goes back 25 years to somebody who submitted a certain set of plans to the Concom, and it was completely different that they submitted to the Board of Health. And there's actually in the Cohasset wetlands regulations, there's a prohibition against that. But so I think you'll like this. Everything will be in one place, and a lot of the other boards like water and sewer, they don't really have a bylaw to operate. They just purely operate out of regulations. So it'll be just easy, but moving things from whatever piece of paper they have it on into a new piece of paper with everybody else's regulations.
And when I did my quick count, and I don't know where you got to, but when I went through my printout of the bylaw, and again, it depends on how you print it, I counted 16 pages that you could easily pull out of our existing bylaws in terms of just procedures or regulations. As a first step, Tom, I want to create, and I'm testing this with the group, I want to create a document that becomes the standard off of which we redline. And what I mean by that is I want to take our existing bylaw and literally parse it into what is rules and regulations and what is a reorganization of our existing, to sort of demonstrate to to people that critique us that we literally have not changed one iota of text, but rather taken these sections out and organized it in rules and regulations. And we've taken the existing bylaws and reorganized it into a flow that makes more sense without making any textual change. Because I think we have to prove to people that we're starting from a place of zero changes.
Well, let me say this about that. That can be done because I have a Word version of the existing bylaw. I have, and I can move it around organizationally easily. It's going to be hard. This is where the more you think about this and get into it, it's hard to do this rewrite in pieces, not impossible, but the reorganization, again, particularly, I think it needs definition changes to come with it. And that requires some degree of change, textual change.
And I'm not suggesting
we can say no, and then I could certainly.
No, Tom, Katie isn't saying we stop there. Katie's saying that we start with making 0 changes and saying,
right,
if we did nothing else, you could do it. Now let's fix what's there. Redundancies.
That can be done. That can be done.
I really feel strongly that unless we start from like a ground zero of like, we literally changed nothing except creating flow and pulling out. And then from there, you clearly identify what changed.
Then we can start editing if we agree with that everything has a place.
That can be done. I can use this format of 10 articles.
And I know it's backtracking a little bit for you, Tom, but the more I think about where we are politically, like proving to people that there's a way of doing this.
I hear you. Right.
The other suggestion that Woody had was creating an index of amendments. And just so that you can kind of see what this looks like, Woody pulled up Concord, which I'll share here, which and again, it sounds silly, but I think we're going to be able to pull like 3 to 5 pages of crap out of, I don't mean crap, I mean very important historical factoids around when changes were made into a index at the back of the document. Because right now in ours, it's scattered all the hell over places.
And as I'm doing the rewrite, I'm deleting those as I go along without, because I don't think they're critical. But yeah.
Well, by law, I think we have to we have to track changes, but you don't need to clutter up the intent of the bylaw with when something was amended.
I agree. Putting it as an appendix to it would be a great idea.
So this is, sorry, I'm like, look how long this is from
Concord.
I mean, like they literally, it says 1927 March, Article 17, this is what changed. And in our bylaws, if you look in our bylaws at a printed copy, it's all that bold text that just like breaks up the reader's flow would get pulled into a single index.
All right, well, that's easy enough to do too. But obviously we're going to have to keep electronic or paper copies of the existing bylaw around for a number of years, because we may have projects that are still somehow grandfathered under today's bylaw after we change it. So,
and I'm happy to, like, Tom, if you want to take the task on, once we agree on a reorganization framework of moving the existing text into that order and pulling out existing text into rules and regulations, I'm happy to start work on this index of table amendments.
If you want to, that's fine. A lot of this is on my computer. So, what I'm picturing in my head right at the moment is something similar to what I just did for the definitions, is have existing, and then in the change column next to it, at this point, it would only be pointing out what was moved out to regulations, and not making any of the other changes. But then in the future, that same chart could be used to plug in textual changes and you'd be able to easily compare it to the existing.
Yeah, I think that would work.
That's the format that's popping into my head. But.
And again, ultimately, I think that we kind of, if we're going to take our existing bylaws and bifurcate them into an Appendix A, which is the table of amendments, a rules and regulations document, and then the actual bylaws themselves, we'll take the existing kit and caboodle and split it into those 3 documents.
I have not circulated the draft regulations document, have I?
You did a long time ago.
I could certainly just show you the.
Okay,
you could see the table of contents. I'm not going to send the whole damn document, but you can see I'll circulate that so you at least see how it would look. And again, I'm using the Code of Massachusetts regulations as the model for organizing.
Okay. But in your current draft, Tom, does it include more than just text from the
Does it include edits?
What, in the regulations themselves?
Yeah.
in what you've
Regulations.
what you've got documented?
Yeah, at the moment, but I won't even show you that. I'll just show you the outline from an organizational point of view,
Okay.
so you see what would be in it, what subject matters would be moving over to regulations. And it's a lot of stuff. It's
a lot more than 16 pages. I mean, I don't count. It's 30 or 40.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the redraft that I have on the computer is something like 58, 60 pages of the, in the typeface that I did, and I haven't compared it to the existing bylaw that I now have in Word format, but I'm going to guess that's probably 80, 90 pages. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can get out.
I guess my only question to the group is, should we ask Carolyn, as we're pulling out rules and regulations or procedures, if there's any kind of legal line that we should be aware of? Because I see the value of debulking the bylaws of this procedures and rules and regulations. One, because it sort of slims down and makes the document more user-friendly. But in addition, since these are going to be rules and regulations and still subject to public hearings, you have the ability to change them more frequently or as needed. But I guess my question to her is, like, is there any scenario in which you're better off having something in the bylaws versus in the rules and regulations when you're, I don't know, going to land court, or you're having a discussion with an applicant? Is there power in having in the bylaws versus rules and regulations?
My answer to that would be no. She and I have kind of touched on that subject, but my answer would be no. I think the bigger concern, especially since we saw all the suspicions at special town meeting, is that people are going to be suspicious. Are we, if we have things that don't have to come to town meeting to be changed, is something going to be up? Is the planning board and the zoning board trying to pull a fast one here? I think it's going to be, most importantly, a political selling job to people, more than the substance of the boards using the tools and then defending the tools in a court.
Let me ask Lauren, do you have any experience or point of view on this little mini debate that's going on?
I'm sorry, I was actually multitasking.
Oh.
I'm trying.
No. Okay. Well, so the point is there value in maybe either not moving rules and regulations out of the bylaw main body, or to repeat some of these rules and regulations in the event that somebody wanted to take issue with a board's finding or procedures? Does it have more weight if it's part of the bylaws as opposed to an administrative document?
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. In my experience and what I've been advised sort of from peers, it's better to not have it in the bylaws because it just creates that much more rigidity and issue if you need to update something. If it's an administrative portion, it's easier to just do that through a public hearing process and regulate that document as is. And it does make the bylaws sort of overly cumbersome to have it in the bylaw.
All right. So that's consistent with our own thinking. I mean, I get a sense here.
One of the things in seeing what can stay and what can go, and I'll point to the two alternative energy bylaws because I recently spent some time looking through them. Those things are long-winded. The application procedures, what you need to file, clearly can go to regulations, and there's no substantive impact to that. And as an example, modern technology is now taking us away from paper plans to electronic plans. And so we'd have that kind of flexibility. But there are a lot of things in those bylaws and in some others that are the criteria upon which either planning or zoning will issue a special permit. For the most part, I have not moved those out because I do think though the substantive criteria for issuing a permit, my own view as an attorney is that has to stay in the bylaw.
I mean,
but it still makes some of these articles, a little long-winded, and perhaps the list of criteria we have on a given topic doesn't need to be as long as it currently is. But I really think the substantive legal basis for your decision should be in the bylaw. It's just a purely administrative crap that goes out. And then the other thing is about the timelines for response to it. This is where I think I'd like Carolyn's opinion as well, but like the timelines, I think the timelines might need to stay in the bylaw as they are found in state statutes, that you have, 21 days to act or 65 days to act and 21 days to issue a decision. I think those are substantive things that need to stay in the bylaw, especially since a lot of the timelines are rooted in state statute.
I had a similar reaction when I was going through in the last day or so, kind of identifying what I would pull out, that timelines. It kind of went back to this whole stupid conversation we were having about the subdivision bylaw and the Jerusalem estates, where the specific timeline of having to file within 6 months at the Norfolk Registry of Deeds was not expressed in the bylaw. It felt like timelines should remain in, even though that it feels like an administrative piece. It might be.
Yeah, and one of the things I suggested for the user friendliness of this is that we would have another appendix to the bylaw, table of uses, table of area dimensions. We would have a timeline table so that as a single page, a unsophisticated user, an applicant, is be able to see what all the timelines are. And then the boards, of course, would be able to use that too. It'd all be in one place, in addition to being stated where it needs to be stated in the bylaw itself.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think in terms of a basic premise around rules and regulations, it sounds like, Tom, if you can create that document that just pulls in what you believe is the text that should be excerpted from the bylaws to create at least a beginning framework of this rules and regulations that parodies. Is it the CMRR? Is that what you were referring to?
I have it presently titled the Code of Cohasset Regulations.
Okay.
You can name it whatever you'd like. Massachusetts, it's the Code of Massachusetts Regulations.
Gotcha.
And the federal is the, I don't know what the federal.
I like the parity between the CMR and the CCR. All right. So in terms of the reorganization itself, we today have 22 articles minus, we nixed 16, so we're back down to 21 articles. This is the reorganization outline that kind of builds on what Tom did. It takes a slightly different perspective. So it starts with a preface, which would be a new create, but it basically summarizes for users what the differences are in terms of your zoning bylaw versus the other bylaws that the town has as it relates to land use. This, again, totally optional, but in the example of Concord, which I circulated, it's a nice little preamble. So in the end, take it, I mean, the community can take it or leave it, but I do think that having that preamble is helpful. Context setting for those that are using the bylaws themselves. But if people don't like it, it's not critical in terms of what we're proposing here. What the reorg suggests is that there be an Article 1, Purpose and Administration, that would basically wrap in our existing Article 1, our existing Article 13, which is amendment and availability, and then pull in administration and enforcement, but break it from a reader's perspective into an administration, which is part of what's in Article 12, and then an enforcement section, which is also part of the existing Article 12. So purpose and administration would be one article up front instead of being split into 3 places in our current bylaw. So that's proposal number 1. Proposal number 2 is definitions. And we have a lot of definitions. And as Tom has laid out for all of us, they're scattered amongst our existing article and then basically every other overlay or amendment that we've done in the last 20 years has its own separate set of definitions. What's being proposed here is that we merge into a single definition section the definitions that are in our existing Article 2, which is the bulk of them, plus definitions that relate specifically to residential and commercial, which are the definitions out of residential cluster, Article 10, our transit overlay district, Article 17, our moratorium on marijuana, and then our Harbor Village business overlay. So we would pull all these definitions into a single place. And this, obviously, step 1 is to get them all consolidated and alphabetized. Step 2 is to then begin to edit them and make changes. Lauren, question for you on the moratorium on marijuana. Woody pointed out to me that this actual moratorium expired in December of 2018. Does that mean we have another expired article that we need to deal with, or how do we think about that?
I will inquire with council. I haven't had an opportunity yet, but I'll be in touch on that.
Okay. I mean, I feel like it's a third rail. Like, I don't want to be the one removing the moratorium on marijuana. Like, I feel like there was a lot of passionate citizens back when that was put in. But the reality is that, like many things, nobody remembered that a year later it was going to expire. And so we've been sitting here for 4 or 5 years with an expired article. So I'm not recommending we remove it, but like at some point we got to deal with the fact that it's expired.
No, somewhere else though in the bylaw, maybe it's 21, but I thought it was also somewhere in Article 4 or current or use article. I think we have very detailed bylaw on regulating marijuana establishments and medical facilities, and
yeah, I think Tom, I think Carolyn, the article section 4 or whatever it is has been changed and updated, and B, the moratorium may no longer be legal because it was to give towns a breathing spell to get their act in order. But Carolyn can tell us.
Yeah, but I think we did get our act in order because we have some very detailed bylaw about citing and use.
Yeah, I think some of that has been tweaked a little bit because some towns were gaming the system, but not a big deal. But I would just turn both those articles over to Carolyn or her staff and say what needs fixing. Maybe not the process we're going through now, Katie, but we need to know if it's to be eliminated or not. Yeah, maybe out of our hands. I mean, so I think more state.
I don't think we can prohibit the use outright.
Absolutely.
So the regulations that we had, the things in the bylaw we had now carried over to what I wrote before. I wasn't changing those in substance at all.
Right. I would just move on from that one.
Yeah. So Lauren, when you do reach out to Carolyn, I would direct her to obviously Article 21, and it's 21.4 that has the sunsetting in it, but we also need her to opine on some of 4.3, which is additional use regulations. And it looks like we have 4.30, which is medical marijuana treatment center. We have 4.3P, which is hardship cultivation of medical marijuana. I think those are the two that we need in addition.
Okay.
And again, I feel like this is like a third rail with the safe harbor folks. So I want to proceed carefully, but I also think we need to figure out, like, we're doing the reorg here. Like, if we've got stuff that's dead or no longer applies, we need to cull it out.
Yeah, the 4 through O through P and whatever, that would all survive because we need that.
Yeah.
you know, we need that because we can't prohibit the use outright. So 21 itself, I don't think we need 21 because that was specifically just a moratorium, a holding pattern.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Okay. So that's
definitions. Where we allow the use. That's the other issue with marijuana is where we're going to allow such businesses to operate should they choose to operate in Cohasset.
Yes.
Okay, well, we shouldn't get into content at this point.
All right.
Zoning districts, not changing Article 3. I guess my only question that I kind of raised here was we listed all our zoning districts, and yet all of our overlay district boundary descriptions are buried in the overlays themselves. I never really understood why you would have your zoning districts listed one place and then have other district boundaries listed elsewhere, because it's all on the same zoning map that's referred to in Article 3. So part of my thought process was, do we want to move the district boundaries conversation out of the overlay themselves and put it in the zoning district conversation when you're thinking about mapping and where is all this stuff located?
Well, in one difference, I think, between this and what I had proposed is, yes, all the boundary definitions would be in the zoning district article. Your Article 8 here, which would be the substance of these, you know, of the existing overlay articles, I was moving them to what under this outline would be Article 5 as just expressions of different, you know, variations on use. Actually, they'd be in Article 4 perhaps, but and this separate Article 8, you can do it that way, but I would have, my organization wouldn't have a separate, they'd be moved into the uses, I think, not the dimensional one. They would be moved into Article 4 as sections rather. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it makes some sense, Tom. But what you're really saying, let me try to paraphrase it. Take Article 8 and make it Article 4. Article 4 becomes 5, and on we go.
No. I'm saying take Article 8. Article 8 would become sections of Article 4. It wouldn't be a standalone article at all.
Oh.
That's.
Well, anyway, okay.
It doesn't matter. I will use this format, and then you know, I could make a note and say, well, see what I had suggested as an alternative. But right now, I'm gonna follow this format for the purposes of the next step in discussion.
Okay, no, that's great. And again, I think where I'm at was like, let's spin it into this organization, and we may find some holes just based on going through that exercise of like, as you're saying, maybe there's a piece of these that needs to get moved into uses. But for now, the idea would be to move the district boundaries from the overlay districts into Article 3, but then the substance of the overlays into Article 8.
Correct.
And then in terms of like, we still have 4 other overlays, floodplain, watershed, water resource, wind, and solar. And to be honest, these are like ginormous articles as written. Maybe they get debulked some when we start pulling out rules and regulations. But part of my thinking was to group them kind of subject wise into an Article 9, which dealt with overlays or issues that were related to environmental and land alteration. Yeah. And then another one that had alternative energy at the back. Yeah. And again, this sort of sets it up for future conversations with the community.
That's fine. Again, and the only change I had was basically putting all use related articles into one place under the use article. Yeah. Here would be Article 4. It doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter. Okay. And it might be easier to do it this way by subject matter for future add-ons and amendments.
Because I was kind of thinking, like, as we were starting to perhaps, as people get the minds wrapped around resiliency related or climate related zoning that they want to do, it sort of in some places perhaps puts a framework where you could make those changes or insert those changes. So anyway, the big proposal, and this was following a little bit of what we discovered in Concord, was taking our use regulations and splitting it into an article on use regulations related to residential, and then an Article 5, which was use regulations related to business and other. And then, further within each of those, Article 4, organizing the text so that it flowed in a manner so that you could go in and figure out use regulations relative to 1 family, 2 family. We were slotting in ADUs, moving it out of a standing article into use regulations. It would give a logical place to find inclusionary zoning. I always have to think to myself, where the hell is that inclusionary zoning in here? And then it would give us the ability to slot in something like multifamily, transient lodging, such as inns, motels, B&B, Airbnb, accessory residential, storage and equipment. And, one of the observations is that today in our zoning bylaws, we have, I believe it's 18 footnotes on our use table.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, actually, if you add A and B, you get you get even more. So you get 20 at least. Well,
yeah.
20, yeah.
So those would be gone. Those really do need to get consolidated somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Where they more logically belong.
It drives applicants crazy. Applicants don't realize it, and as John Hallen can attest, they didn't even in the Stasco situation on Jerusalem Road, the neighbors' attorneys didn't realize it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the table of uses. And again, each of these entries is like a sentence unto itself. And the question is, and you've already done this quite a bit, Tom, is like, how much of this text belongs here in the table versus how much of this text belongs in the actual bylaws themselves? Because right now, this table is incredibly...
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm proposing a massive simplification of the table of uses, especially in the commercial areas. But, these distinctions, dwelling existing on one side, we have to think about whether those matter anymore.
Yeah, and also if as you go through it, and I don't want to sort of edit it now, under residential, RA, RB, RC are exactly alike throughout. So you might as well just talk about it as residential and don't have people worry about the difference, some secret definition, but a distinction between RB and RC, because there isn't any.
Yeah.
One column it says residential and under.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, if it doesn't, to Tom's point, we either, it's either obsolete or we leave it separate. But.
Right, and the definitions of what these things would be in the definitions. This thing about a distinction between a house built before January 55 is a regulatory distinction, and the question, do we need it anymore?
Exactly.
The definition will be elsewhere. 1 family is this, 2 family is this, multifamily is this, accessory dwelling unit is this, and then there's a lot of stuff here. But
okay,
well, I think I recently circulated with the definitions, the table of uses that I suggest, which is super simplified, and it may be oversimplified, but our table of uses is, I think, incredibly exhaustively long.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring up yours, Tom. Just as a
mine is more. You don't need to bring up mine right now because it's more. It's. I'm sorry, Lauren.
That's okay. I just have to say goodbye, but I'll see you all soon.
Actually, I'm headed to the same meeting too. So
okay.
All right, you guys.
All right.
Live long and prosper.
Big sigh of relief was that from John and Lauren. Thank God.
But we don't have to get exhaustively into the table of uses.
I think we ought to try to see what it looks like when things get reorganized, and then we'll find there are anomalies that will have to stay anomalies, and there'll be things that we could say, well, simplify it. I mean, I'd give it a try. That's what I'd do. And if it doesn't work, I think it'll be apparent to us. And of course, what might be apparent as in a phased, step 2 or step 3 is that it's not just sorting regulations. There are going to be areas where we have no coverage whatsoever. And, editing is going to be more than eliminating duplications. It may be saying, oh my God, we don't even deal with this.
Yeah, it may be a gaping hole is what
but that's another kind of a content area that.
Okay, so we've got Article 5, which is business and other use regulations. And then Article 6, which is dimensions. I think, Woody, you felt like that it should read dimensions instead of table of area regulations because it's a lot more than just area. And this,
yeah, it's more than area.
Yeah, this is the one. I'm sorry, I was confusing the use table and the table of area regulations, but it's the table of area regulations currently that has all this footnotes that it's kind of burying some secret keys.
Well, and as Tom brought up, I mean, a lot of these commercial districts of our 3 or 4 along the highway, it's the same. These buried footnotes apply to 3 or 4 districts. Maybe we just have who knows?
We do have one commercial district.
It'll be obvious to us when we try to sort it. But I can't,
Until you see it, sometimes you can't kind of envision how you ultimately want to fix it. And then Article 7 would be special regulations combining sign, parking, and our non-conforming uses. So
these apply basically to all districts or
And I guess the question on large homes, Tom, is like, we're at the point of like, either we keep it and put it here, or one suggestion that Woody had is just move it to rules and regulations, like pull it out of the bylaws.
No, that would make it even less useful.
Okay.
Well, again, I've shared with Katie lots of things I've written while I was away. I had time while my girlfriend was at her trade show. And I caught up on making substantive comments on a lot of things. And my thought about large home review in a nutshell has always been is get rid of it. And then when we decide on the new measurement for a house, the size of a house, whether we use floor area ratio or gross floor area, whichever one of those two we use, do we create, instead of, if you exceed a hard limit that we put in, it's going to require a variance. But do we create something to the effect that, if you're at that 110% of whatever the maximum gross floor area, I'll just use that one as an example, allowed, you can seek to build a house that size by special permit, and it's only after the 110% you're over, then you need a variance. I think that's the policy thing to think about. But this thing is friggin' useless. And we had another project last night for a house that was in its natural state over 3,500 square feet, and it was getting larger. It's just, but there's not a lot we can substantively do to regulate. The neighbor brought up one concern about a new driveway. And in the criteria that exists now, you can try to shoehorn something in, but it isn't easy because it really has no meat on the bone, and it becomes just as John has said before, a forum for people to argue with each other.
Yeah, it sets up false hopes.
So I mean, in doing this reorganizing in this format, I'll be glad to put it in there, but I think it either goes or we create some carve out like I just suggested in the dimensions table when we finally decide what's the maximum we're going to allow under gross floor area or floor area ratio.
Okay. I don't feel like there's a lot of argument from either your board or frankly the community right now for I'm going to use a double negative.
Well, I think there's people
not eliminating this.
No, I think there's at least 2 people on my board who wouldn't want to eliminate it.
I'm sorry, say that again. Who would?
I think there's at least 2 people on my board who wouldn't want to eliminate it.
Oh, really?
Wow. Because what this? All right.
It's you, but I made the argument until I'm blue in the face to that.
Well, I mean, one of the things is if you've got a large home review, you damn well better have a lawyer. And if it's sort of a pro forma review without any enforcement teeth. I've just spent $500 or $1,000 to go through some charade.
Yeah. Well,
I don't
again,
think that's fair.
I think when we settle on either a GFA or an FAR for residences, you know, we're going to effectively eliminate this process. And then again, we just have to decide, is the alternative to go over at a variance, or do we give a little wiggle room to somebody? But under the if we gave wiggle room, it should be a special permit standard of review, because the current large home review at best is equivalent to site plan, and it's site plan review, and it's useless.
Well, we can, you know, and there are flaws in that. You would even if you kept it, you'd have to rewrite it, because you cannot, by law, mess around with the interior of a house. Really, you cannot deny certain things, whereas exterior you can.
Correct.
So on and so forth. But
now,
anyway,
again,
that's.
I'll just make a note that, again, with this Article 7, in my rewrite, they would have all been under Article 4 as uses. And my proposed Article 4, which I think is Article 7 now, you know, has like 20 sections to it, because it moved all of these separate articles.
It's too much. Yeah, I like that.
That's fine. So that's fine. And by the way, I don't know if anybody has waded through the sign and parking regulations. I haven't suggested any changes. I don't know if they're needed. The sign thing is so detailed on the number of.
Yeah, I know. I mean, believe me, I've half memorized it, but I don't want to deal with it now.
Yeah. All right.
But you're right. I mean, it's
actually, I would suggest that instead of like hitting people up front with sign, you sort of go from, like, I don't know, it feels to me like the order should be in order of importance, which is non-conforming uses and structures, parking, sign, and then large home review. You're sort of going from
right. And sign is largely, the value of signs is largely a free A kind of commercial things. I mean, you know, home occupations, we don't get plagued with, you know, oversized signs on Elm Street or something. You know, somebody's a seamstress. I mean, it's.
I think I also took a lot of those things and moved them into definitions, and the whole laundry list of different types of signs are in the draft definitions. And again, do we need them all? I don't know that we need them all.
Yeah, you know, that's why I'd like to take as we go finish this, take a pass on editing definitions at this moment. I think once we have an agreed upon structure and say the structure works, then the definitions can be tweaked or modified or eliminated if we need to.
Okay. Cassie, I don't know if you're caught up on other things or whether you have comments or thoughts around kind of the flow that we've been commenting on.
No, I'm here, guys. I don't really have any comments. Tom, just really impressed, and thank you.
We're starting to get into the deep weeds of rewriting this thing, and it's going to get technical, complicated, nitpicky, you know, but we got to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a huge leg up for once we bring in the consultant. Hopefully it saves us some money.
Yeah.
I also believe, and
I want to be paid.
We should move on, because I don't have another hour to go available. But I really think a lot of things will be self-evident, and where we will be concentrating our mental energies are on things that need to be reconciled or, you know, adjusted.
Yep.
But
well, there were some things too, Katie, that we added to the proposal. Remember, we added like sustainability, climate resiliency. I mean, it's not really bylaw sections, but like where would be a home for that, or historical districts, things like that.
So right now I would put resiliency under Article 9 somewhere around environmental and land alteration as kind of a future home for that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of historical, Woody brought this up, but I think I right now I kind of have it slated under overlay districts.
Yep.
Well, we have it, but it's to my estimation personally that it's too limited geographically, and I'm not sure we have the right horsepower. But be that as it may,
and are we trying to include demo delay somewhere?
Well,
Not yet, Cassie.
That would be an edit that we're not doing with yet, but
yeah.
Demo delay would, again, I put it all under the use article.
Okay.
Yeah, and demo delay in a way is very much akin to large home review. You can delay something a year, maybe a year and a half if town meeting votes for it, but you can't prevent it. The only entity that can prevent a demolition is Historic District Commission by law. They have the right to say forever or whatever, you have to keep that historic building. But I don't want to get into the merits plus or minus. I think it's in the right place.
But so any of those homes in Cohasset that have a housing tour plaque, if someone wanted to tear that down and rebuild, does it go through? Well,
I don't know. We haven't voted. The town hasn't. We don't have a proposal and the town hasn't approved. I mean, most things are overlays. Hingham has something like 11 historic districts, all under one commission.
Yeah.
Other towns do it by age.
So right now, Cassie, a lot of what you see with those HT historic tour are outside the historic district. So unless it's in the historic district.
No, exactly. So is there no way to,
no,
you can't prevent someone from
Well, there could be, but the town meeting would have to vote and say, here's how we define historic districts. It's by age, anything with an HT sign, or I mean, I'm making this up, but the town would have to agree to that.
It's a substantive change.
But they could agree to it. It would be legal if the town voted it.
It's a part of the historic district conversation.
Yeah. That's a big discussion.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
I mean, today we have one is limited in scope and our commission is sort of.
Well, it's a butters, basically.
It's butters for the common. But should we have a conversation about expanding and adding to our historic districts? Yes, but right now, I guess to sort of address it, Cassie,
at least we have a placeholder there. I mean, we have an entity. It's imperfect, but we have it.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the concept of Tom, if you're up to it.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Katie. Woody and I discussed, remember we discussed briefly, Woody, in lieu of large home review, site plan review for homes or some type of design review?
There used to be, Tom, a design review board that originally was at the beck and call of the planning board. Then it sort of transitioned into a commercial design and review board only, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, and now we have the village and the harbor design regulations.
But you don't have a design review board.
No, we don't. But
no, and I feel like also the guidelines, they're purely guidelines. I don't know how strictly enforced they are.
But you did have, Cassie, I think as you and I talked, some people with professional expertise. They were architects, historic preservationists, lawyers, etc. None of whom are doing business in town, but they were, or should be doing business in town. Let me put it that way. But but they had expertise to bear.
Yeah, or if
it was advisory.
They can just recluse themselves if it's a conflict of interest. Like if John Teriyaki wanted to be on that and it was for something that he didn't work on, I don't see the problem in that.
Okay, well that may be, but but it's advisory. The planning board at that point could accept it or not accept it.
I was remember one of the first Mass Association of Concom meetings I went to out in Worcester, and perfect advice: never, ever, ever rely on purely an aesthetic basis for a decision. And even though a design review board would be advisory, I just don't think we should even invite going down that road of getting, the village and harbor thing is doing that, in their gut. But
what about within the historic
they're
district
clearly unenforceable guidelines?
Roads.
Yeah, you're right, Cassie. Scenic roads is simply a step side, an aspect of this.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, anyway, we have great opportunities to dig into this.
Maybe I should put myself back on mute. I wasn't trying to.
No. I think what happens is if you agree on the outline and then can take a look at the mishmash of our present bylaws resorted, you'd probably take it article at a time or something of that sort, and you say, let's for the next month tackle who knows what, zoning districts or special regulations and deal with that. But there's a lot of discussion.
Yeah, no, I think I just want to make sure that the bigger conversations, that there was something that, historic district kind of considering demo delays, things like that. So no, I agree.
Yeah, I think.
Well, and Cassie, what you bring up is that we need to make sure that the outline that we've identified has a place to slot those future conversations into, which I think is helpful. Pointing that out, let's not forget that we have talked about where would that go in this new organization.
Yeah.
And Cassie's already brought up one that I think is appropriate to put into the environmental and land alteration, which is sustainability, even if there is no bylaw.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, at present or body, or is there an organization even in town dealing with that?
Can I mention something about that? Because I've talked about this with Katie.
I probably opened a can of worms.
No. After those sustainability recent seminars that somebody organized, I kind of made a tentative reach out to Jack Buckley and then Amy's husband, Tom Bell, about any suggestions they might have about our bylaw, but very informal question, and nothing has been set up. And it's the same with the Alternative Energy Committee. I'm suggesting subbing out those two articles, the wind and solar one, to them since they wrote it.
Sure, I would agree.
And saying, here's some suggestions I have, but do you have any suggestions for changing? And the same thing on the sustainability. That's not something that I have an expertise, or I don't know anybody does, and we might have to hire an outside consultant. And I don't know that there's any model bylaws on the subject yet, but I'm thinking, that is it okay that we sub some of this out? Another thing is Clark, in trying to argue against our new regulation about roadways, has brought up the idea of low impact development. And I guess this is a concept that is circulating in the planning community. And I said to him, well, is there a model bylaw for this? Or what do you mean? What does low impact development mean when you translate it to a bylaw? And part of that is to try to engage Clark into this process, since he's the one who brought it up. But there are things we should be thinking out that are outside the current zoning box in Massachusetts that are being discussed on the periphery, and we should bring these in. But the reason I'm bringing this up is the concept of subbing this out to other people rather than the 4 of us doing it.
Yeah.
If there's a larger group that provides various services that works with us on this, maybe that's part.
I mean, even on the accessory dwelling bylaw, even though they don't have any authority over it, I was going to ask the Affordable Housing Committee and the trust.
We've already gone to the Affordable Housing Committee on ADUs, and it's a wild conversation there.
They agree that it's not affordable.
But all right, well then never mind. But I mean, certainly the wind and solar articles.
Yes,
I would like permission to sub out. The sustainability. Again, I've started with Jack and Tom, but I don't know who the experts are. Perhaps the companies that made the presentation, who ran that?
Well, we may not have to do anything at this moment.
Not at this moment. No,
I think an enhancement of the master plan at some point.
I think that at least on sustainability, the consultants that we're talking about bring in, one of the things that we put in the RFQ was benchmarking and model bylaws, and that's a perfect example where here are 3.
Good. Yeah. And the same with this low impact development. They'll know all about that stuff too. So.
Yeah. Again, but I think what we're learning from this conversation is that as these bigger topics come up, we have to keep on asking ourselves a question: if we're going to include them in the future, where would they go in this
Yeah.
organization. And if there isn't a home, then we need to kind of think through, are we missing
Exactly.
something in organization? That's all.
Yep.
Okay.
My only thought about the environmental and my proposal is that land alteration, again, to eliminate a lot of text, the article itself would disappear, and the dimensional requirements would be moved into the table of dimensions, and it is possible to do that. Just as a means of eliminating text we don't necessarily need, but still having the concept.
Okay, but that's like phase 2.
Yeah, that's phase 2.
Okay. So I think what I'm taking away is sort of phase 1 is sort of splitting it into 3 documents to begin with: a reorganization of existing text against this table of contents that we've been talking about, the rules and regulations, and a index of the table of amendments. And if we can get that work done, that's the substance for a meeting or 2 to review all of that. I think there's going to be some that are easy to look at. And as you suggested, Woody, there's a couple like use regulations where we may have to come at it once or twice before we're satisfied.
Yeah, I'm sure we will have to. Yeah. But you got to start somewhere.
Yep.
I'd rather start with what we have, and then rather than edit on the fly.
All right.
Okay. So Tom, again,
I will try to have it by the end of the weekend.
Okay.
As always, because there's so much.
You don't have to plow, Tom.
There's so well. No, I'm not worried about that. It's keeping me away from house projects, which is fine.
However you want to, like, if it was me, I'd be, if you were my husband, I'd have you doing my house projects, but that's okay.
You know what? But see, I don't have anybody to answer.
Exactly.
Just the cat. The cat's okay with our slovenliness.
Yes. As I told my husband long time ago, it's an optional activities list. But unfortunately, the optional activities list gets recopied from weekend to weekend. So
year after year in some households.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
But there's so much stuff on the computer that I have that I can it's just a lot of cutting and pasting, but that's not hard stuff. So.
Okay. Well, hopefully there's some.
Well, don't do it all, Tom. I mean, you've got the rest of us to.
Yeah, I sent you also by email on the Outlook, the town email, the table of contents for the regulations. And then I did, as far as text, I only sent you the first section that would be like a general application section that would apply to all boards. But just so for your thoughts on that, that'd be great.
Okay. So you'd like some comments back on the rules and regulations.
Just the format of it at this point.
The table of contents on it.
Yeah, and what you think, of the substance of that first sort of omnibus.
Would you mind resending it again? I don't really use my town.
Well, I sent it to you at your Gmail address.
Yeah, good. Okay, all right. So but when?
I think while we were talking, Woody.
Okay.
It's in your inbox now.
Oh, okay. All right. No, I was trying to go back in my head.
No, you should. It should be towards the top.
All right. We don't need to. All right, that's great.
And then I guess the definitions will be the next discussion because again, it's difficult. I mean, yes, can we just reorganize our current bylaw and still work with it? Of course we could. We're working with it now, but
that's not what we're proposing, though. We're proposing.
No, but I
would like to postpone definitions until we agree with content or tackle some of that, because I think the definitions will reflect the body of the bylaw, not the other way around.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Well,
I mean, you can do it, but I mean, all of a sudden there'll be, well, I don't know. Seems to me we're adding a step that we may not need.
Well, in terms of that substance, then we really have to tackle the 2 tables.
Yeah, but let's first say, do we like where the bylaws go, or what doesn't make sense? And some of it is going to be redundancy doesn't make sense, omissions don't make sense, misstatements don't make sense. You know what I mean? Once we straighten that out, then I think we look at that crazy, you're right about table of uses. I mean, farm animals in the harbor and things like that. I mean, you know, outdoor movie theaters.
Yep.
Not allowed in the waterfront. I mean, really. I mean,
yeah, no,
we can have a lot of fun with that one, but and I'm also a great believer in whichever board is empowered, give that board flexibility to do an interpretation and application, because there's no way that sitting here in 2022 we're going to understand the technology and the economics of 2040 or 2050.
Right.
Not that they should last that long.
I'll
But,
say
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Outdoor movie theaters. What's the 2080 equivalent? We can't even envision that right now.
I can't envision. Well, yeah. So yes, I think that would be more of a, and kind of a broad definitions as opposed to precise definitions.
Okay.
We ran into that problem, just to finish that off, with the whole veterinary area. Veterinary hospitals were allowed, but pet grooming wasn't. And as a matter of fact, kennels are not even mentioned, although we have a kennel in Cohasset.
And the new proposals deal with all of that.
Yeah.
Again, I tried to.
We were trying to be so precise. What we're doing was
right.
leaving things, skipping things.
Yeah, and my thinking is the exact opposite, to create broader categories.
Yeah.
Especially since we now have the use variance has returned to us. So for example, the table of uses might just say retail uses and not have a laundry list of retail uses, because the zoning board and the planning board will have flexibility on that, especially with the use variance process.
Yeah. Oh, it's
the only ones you specifically have to
mention. This is Tom's table.
I'm just sort of showing how simple Tom had made it, which it really, like, it takes all that verbiage out and gets it down to the high level.
Yeah, and under the commercial uses section, you'd probably put a little meat on the bones, but you don't, to that point, you don't need to try to define every possible commercial use.
Well, yeah. There's two thinking behind that. Number one, you do still, the ones we want to prohibit, like fast food and adult services uses and that kind of stuff, those you have to mention. But, in the law, there's a concept of a lot of things are governed by their plain and ordinary meaning, and you don't have to define every word that's in your bylaw or law or anything else. And particularly since we now have the variance procedure back,
yeah,
retail can be we're in a position where, we know how difficult it is to attract businesses to 3A or the village. I think we're in a beggars can't be choosers mode, and we can't nitpick about what kind of retail uses, but, allow the planning board and the zoning board the discretion, and
to say this is harmonious or not harmonious.
Yeah, and if we think, well, this particular use needs a special permit, fine, like it's in certain districts, we're doing that. And only worry about the ones that you want to prohibit and absolutely don't want in town.
Yeah, I'd rather trust the board's judgments.
So that's the approach by this, to simplify it, and all these uses. And I didn't eliminate animals. There's people who are going to have animals. So there's an animal related section, and there's a definition for animal related uses. It takes in the vegetarian. I don't know if it takes in the
keeping of animals. I like keeping of exotic animals. Nice, Tom.
Oh, and look, it's not allowed anywhere. Well, do we need a line that says it's not allowed?
Well,
give it up to the board.
It's there because that's one of the things that I think is specifically in our current prohibitions. And again, if you don't say it, do we get a Tiger King guy setting up operations in Cohasset?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
You may be right. I mean,
the tiger people, they live amongst us. You don't know it, but there's a tiger next door. Like, that's my biggest fear, is that I don't know my neighbors well enough, and they're keeping a large cat.
But in the definitions too, tried to define animal related uses that gets rid of all those kind of conflicts we had about a veterinarian and kennels. I don't know if I just kennels so much, but maybe you'd have to look at that definition. But yeah, we all have all kinds of weird stuff in this bylaw. But
well, we allowed a veterinary hospital overnight, but we didn't allow daytime veterinary service. I mean, stupid. It was the
one Yeah, the one on 3A, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Anyway.
But anyway, we'll get to that later, but that's, you're right. That probably what we put in the tables first will dictate what definitions we need. But
yeah, exactly. But anyway, these
Okay.
are all bridges we can cross.
Yep.
Or we'll have to, but not on day one.
Well, it sounds like there wasn't, we have agreement around a framework, a working framework. And so next step is for us to meet once Tom has done the work to split it into rules and regulations and the remaining bylaws in this new order. So Tom, I'm happy to set a meeting. I was thinking, honestly, early the week of the 7th would to be our next meeting. I don't know what people's preference is.
well, I'm going to be out of town the 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Okay.
I have a couple of appointments on the 8th. So the 7th right now is my best day.
I can do that.
I can do the 7th.
Okay. Tom, preference?
Right now it's wide open, so pick your time. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. What am I looking at? I'm sorry. I was looking at February.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still gone the 9th, 10th, and 11th. The 8th, Tuesday, is wide open, and the 7th, I would have to do it after 12 noon.
I can do the morning of the 8th, or I can do the afternoon of the 7th.
I just had my standing 10 on Tuesdays, but you guys can obviously have the meeting without me.
No, I would rather have it with you.
Okay.
You'd rather have it without it.
No, I would love to be a part of it, but that's the day before a big submission date, so I just won't be available tomorrow.
Well, is Monday better then?
Yes.
Let's do Monday. Let's do Monday afternoon. Does that work?
Yeah.
Could Monday at 2 work?
Done.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I'll publish that.
Thank you for accommodating that.
The only other thing, just quickly on RFQ, bids are due next Thursday. There is a Zoom link for the interview committee to attend Michelle's bid opening party. And then from there, we go into reviewing of the proposals themselves. I'm hoping that we have 2. I mean, it'd be a miracle if we had 3, but we'll sort of see. We'll know where we're at next Thursday. So I'll shoot an email to the full group for those of you that aren't on our illustrious interview committee.
Katie, do you remember how many proposals you received for the master plan?
I think.
Was it a lot?
No, it was 4 or 5. Maybe we had 5.
Oh, okay.
And we went from 5 and we had to select 3 finalists. I think honestly, one of them was like a non-starter, and it was really, it was pretty easy to get down to 3 finalists. And then we had some trade-offs to make around the finalist interviews, but yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. I mean, the town is never in the position of like getting 10 bids.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever happen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, all right. Okay, guys, unless there's any other business, I'm going to suggest that we adjourn at 1:24.
Got it.
Great.
Reach the guy.
Aye.
All right, guys. Well, good luck with the snow tomorrow. My kids are like already mentally counting on a snow day. So if it doesn't come, there's a lot of upset teenagers in my house, but I think we're good. They're still saying 6 to 8 inches.
I think they'll get there today.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. I will talk to all of you soon. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.